Vincent M. Fortanasce, MD, neurologist, psychiatrist, and bioethicist. He is the director of Neurology Rehabilitation Clinic and president of the California chapter of Physicians for Compassionate Care.
All right, I think we got it right here. Well, I want to tell everybody that I had an epiphany last night. Believe it or not, I woke up at 3:30 in the morning. One of the reasons is that I've been in Europe for 2 weeks, and I got what we call advanced phase syndrome. And but something occurred last night, which was one of the most wonderful things that has ever happened to me, and that is my son came over and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to show you Pop-Pop." That's my father, right? And all of a sudden, he turns on his computer, and there's a video of a ultrasound and a little kid doing this. And he pats me on the back and he says, "Pop-Pop." He says, "You're a grandfather now." That's the first one for me, of course. And really, I really thought I was not going to have any grandchildren because all my kids are in their 30s and, you know, they're all career people. And so it was really wonderful that this occurred. But, you know, it presented a problem because it presented a problem primarily because right after my son said that, later on in the evening, he told me something which is so pertinent to what I'm about to talk about right now. And it was so pertinent that when I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, I wrote a 2.5-hour article on what he had to say to me because it hit me so strongly. And that was, he says, "Dad, you know, there's psychiatric disease on both sides of our family, on my wife's side and ours." He says, "Not only that, but her side has colon cancer and breast cancer." I said, "And we both have terrible allergies, and she has severe asthma." He says, "What's going to happen to our child? And is there anything that we could do about it now?" And what I'm about to talk about is what we call pregenetic implantation, genetics, and selection. We call it PIGS for short. And it has to do with also eugenics. And that is, eu means good in Greek, genics means genes. So good genes. But I think as we all know, what it truly means is designer children. What it really means is the super race. And what most people don't understand, that this will be the greatest issue in the 21st century. Just as last 10 years ago you were hearing about embryonic stem cell research and cloning, this will outdistance that and it'll have more impact on Christianity than any other issue. Why? Because it is in pregenetic selection and implantation and eugenics that man finally becomes God, and that man now determines what he will look like, not God. And there will be and how, you may say, well, gee, this sounds, we've had over 2,000 films of cautionary tales in Hollywood, all telling us what happens when man plays God. But let me tell you something, every one of those films will be forgotten because of just what my son asked me last night. "Dad, is there anything that we can do now?" And what he meant was that little child that I saw wiggling his arms, kicking his feet, and you could actually see the little penis. He was asking me just what I'm about to talk to you about. And I'd like to say, those who ignore history are bound to repeat it. And you can see there's a little background I have here, and I'd like to tell you just a little story, because I think I want to bring this at home. And it's about Sherlock and Dr. Watson. Everybody knows the two. And one day, Dr. Watson came in and saw Sherlock and said, "Sherlock, You look tired. You look fatigued. You look worried. I have to do something for you. I know exactly what we're going to go camping, and there no one will be able to find you. So one night while they were camping, Sherlock turns to Dr. Watson and says, Dr. Watson, look up. He says, what do you see? He says, Sherlock, I see thousands of stars out there. He says, what does that mean to you? Well, Sherlock, I think theologically it means there must be an omnipotent being to have created all that. He says, what else? Well, astrologically, there must be millions of stars and galaxies out there. He says, what else? He says, well, meteorologically, I think it's going to be a fine, fine day tomorrow, Sherlock. What does this all mean to you? Someone stole our tent. Well, what does this all mean? Why are we sometimes oblivious to the obvious? Why are we oblivious to the fact that our children are going to be asking us just what my son asked me? And what he was saying is how genetically can we change my grandson? That's what he was asking. And is that unreasonable? So it's very important. What I'm about to tell you is something that's going to hit us. And we have to be prepared. And we can understand that, look, in 2004, we had a constitutional amendment on Proposition 71. I, of course, was president of No on Proposition 71. $3 billion was given for human cloning and embryonic stem cell research. And I'd say the Christian vote, I'm sorry this thing was changed yesterday, and I gave this to the bishops. So, and so you're going to see a lot of Catholic, but this really refers to Christian. 62% were in favor. It actually was 62% Catholics, overall 64%. In 2005, we talked about the Stanford mice and eugenics and transhumanism. And what you're going to find out today is this is a really informational talk. There are three types of talk: interesting, informational, and inspirational. I hope this will at least be informational. I wish that it would be inspirational. But the Stanford mice happened was that they put 99% human brain into a mouse. And when the news media were outraged, Simply Weissman, who was the head of the program, he says, well, we've been transplanting pig's heart into people's hearts for 40 years. Why are you complaining now? Of course, people not understanding that's completely different. This is, doing something, this is playing God. Putting a material from another animal into a human being is not equated with the same. But within 2 seconds, they all look, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Because what it is, it's the ignorance of individuals, the ignorance of our society. And what I'm about to show you, it's the ignorance of also the American Medical Association, which I found last year when I was out there. They had, I'll get into this. In 2008, euthanasia law was signed by the governor of California. You don't know that. It's called the Terminal Sedation Act. In 2008, the Beniz case, MD, it did away with any type of conscientious objection for physicians. All right, essentially was a law that indicated that if an individual, in this case it was a homosexual woman who wanted a baby, and the doctor refused to do it, the doctor was sued and successfully sued. So it did away with conscientious objection. In 2010, the California Regenerative Board admitted failure for the $3 billion that they got back in 2004. Right? And guess what? If anybody saw the register, the exact same people are now asking for another $3 billion for 2014 because they say now we can cure multiple sclerosis. All a lie. In 2010, marriage was redefined. In 2011, the American Medical Association puts its full support behind human cloning. And they advise discussing pre-genetic implantation and selection, which we're about to talk about today. This is, and I just bring us, what's the difference, the history between slavery, Holocaust, and human embryo? What do they have in common? Man determined who was human, not God. Economics and political policy drove it, and man's indifference permitted it. Why are we silent? Why are we silent? The AMA, in what I call the invincible ignorance. I was asked to go there. I gave talks at the entire caucus and in private caucuses in 4 different regions. Not one person ever stood up and argued with me. Because their logic was this, was that the AMA, and when you have to understand that these are supposed to be physicians, and if they can believe such a non sequitur, then how do you think the general public is going to accept it? Look at this. This is their Judiciary Committee. This is their Ethics and Judiciary Committee. It's supposedly the brightest and finest of all the committees. It states, it reports advising support of human embryonic cloning. Logic. And this is right on the very first page. Their logic was, since morally an embryo cannot be proven to be a human. Now, listen to me. They're talking about morality. These are all doctors, scientists, right? And then they end with, scientifically, an embryo cannot be determined to be a human. Listen to this. And I brought this out, and I said, please, somebody help me understand this. Number one, morality has nothing to do with the humanness of an embryo or any other individual. It's a biological determination. And so they said, therefore, an embryo is not protected under the AMA ethical guidelines. And so therefore, we can do cloning. We can do anything we want with embryos. Because guess what? They're not human. Why do they call them human embryos, I said. And I also said to him, I said, is there any empirical information? When I talk about empirics means is there anything that really points and says, hey, this is what it seems to be, that is human? And I asked them, I said, if everybody believes that there's no scientific or proof or empirical nature that these things are human, I said, who here in this audience, please stand up if you were not one of these embryos at one time? And none of them stood up. I said, so you've all proven my point. I said, and so your whole document is based on these 2 facts. The importance of this is that how are they going to sell pre-genetic selection? And now, what is it? Common sense, I said, is, once again, species of an embryo is a scientific determination, not a moral one. Scientific accuracy of species through DNA analysis is 100%. 101 embryology, the species of the man is named Homo sapiens, or what? Wise man. Why is the AMA oblivious to the obvious? And why are we silent? 2 months later, the California Board of Regenerative Medicine asked for a second $3 billion after they admitted they failed, their prior research failed. And October 24th, we went through this. Why pre-genetic selection? Number one, it's economics. Biotechnology will gain what? Trillions of dollars, not billions. You have to understand what I'm about to tell you is not how it is going to be an option for you. There'll be no option. Convenience of a utilitarian society. In fact, I already started doing, and I have 42 votes now, about if you had the ability to have a baby in vitro, that is, in a test tube, would you have it or not? Right now, the vote is 20 would, 24 wouldn't. Is that amazing? It really isn't amazing. Political power, wedge issues, all right? And this is going to be a huge wedge issue, just as the stem cell research was. Because what they did was that, are these Christians, are they going to tell you what you can and can't do? And that was the wedge issue. Not understanding that this is a failed science, not understanding that this is using another individual for your benefit. It's no different than, for instance, taking the heart of some poor beggar who's on the street and giving it to a real wealthy man who has still a lot of good years ahead of him. So it is essentially saying that the end justifies the means. And sacrificing another person's life for another person is never something that is permissible. Now, what is the pregenetic implantation and selection? These are all changed, by the way, but I have PGD, but it's PIGS. It's pregenetic implantation, genetics, and selection. Pregenetic implantation, genetic diagnosis, all right? First, what they do is they get the fertilized eggs, all right? These are all human fertilized eggs. They then test to see the presence of certain genes, if they're there or not. Then what they do is they take the ones that don't have the bad, for instance, they don't have the marker for breast cancer, they don't have the marker for colon cancer, they don't have the marker for schizophrenia, whatever have you, right? And they discard the other ones that do have that marker. And the important thing here is that something that really should be permissible? Right? Is it any different than, wanting, I always do this, I gave a talk with a whole bunch of lawyers one time. I said, is this any different than your mother and father really wanting a doctor and they wound up with 8 lawyers and 1 doctor, so they threw out the other 8 lawyers? Nobody laughed. The future, pregenetic screening, eugenics, and transhumanism. Biotechnology Law Report on Pregenetic Implantation and Eugenics by Jordan. This I advise everybody to read. If you don't, you will not understand why your freedom to object, your freedom to have a child that is not pregenetically selected or eugenically enhanced, why you will have no freedom. It will occur. In 1991, pregenetic selection originated to prevent lethal genetic disorders. It was made possible by in vitro fertilization. It was regarded as a giant step to eliminate many crippling neurological diseases that maimed over 100,000 children a year. All right, and this is all very, very, laudable. The Armageddon biological report on pregenetic selection, what they did is they said, well, should we be able to pregenetically select, right, and enhance once eugenics comes in, and that is the ability to make a person look better, make a person more intelligent, more appealing, more athletic, more resistant to disease. Should this be allowed? And what they did is they based it. Now, what I'm doing right now is just the way they presented things with Proposition 71, the embryonic stem cell research. What they did is they used euphemisms. Number one, they never mentioned cloning in the entire act, right? Did you realize they never mentioned cloning? They mentioned somatic cell nuclear transfer, and everybody knows what that is, right? No, you don't. Well, that's what they were hoping, because they didn't want to mention cloning because 91% of the people in California were against cloning until it was passed. And then 70% of the people were for cloning. Did you know that? Only took them a month. All right, what they did is they said, well, we got to make this decision on what we call an open society, and they talked about a closed society, which I'll go into. Now, parental autonomy, should the basis of us doing this pregenetic selection and eugenics be based on the parents, that is what they want? Should it be based on what is best for society? Or should it be based on the child's best interest? Who would pick what? Of course, child's best interest. Now, as soon as you say that, you're hooked. All right? Because the problem is that the problem with the original concept, should this be permissible? And that is, should we be killing 8 to 9 embryos, human embryos, just to find the one that we want. Open free society mandate. This is the conclusions that they drew. Well, I tell you, by the time I finished this article, it was 16 pages, I was sweating. The Biotechnology Report 2003 concluded it was in the best interest of the child that must come first. Any system based on sentimental morality, by the way, that's us, theism, that's us, and natural law, oh my God, natural law, never. All right, what does the report mean? What does this really report mean with that sentence? Non-use of this technology and liability and criminal prosecution, he goes on to talk about this, means we all will be mandated to use this technology or be prosecuted, all right? Because one of the sentences was that non-use of this technology, when it is available, and let me help you understand why this is going to become mandated. Compromising of the prospective child's health, because it is going to compromise the child, just like my son asked me, what can be done? Now, listen to some of the laws that have already been passed. This gives the child and the government the right to sue for harm done by a what? Negligent parent, and that's exactly what they talk about. Any parent who would not consider this would be considered negligent. England has a law mandating the destruction of any human abnormal embryos. Do you know that? It's a law. Well, they have to examine it. That's how they know. Societal prejudice genotype. I mean, these are the words. We're talking about euphemisms, right? You know who that prejudice? That's Christians, right? Our societal prejudice genotype. Biotechnology law report on PGS and eugenics concludes, if it becomes such common practice in a future open society that non-use of eugenics and pre-genetic implantation is perceived as unreasonable, the birth of any child with genetic disease or disability will give cause to liability, perhaps even criminal prosecution. Any compromise of the prospective child's health and ability will certainly constitute harm to the child. All right, the biotechnical law report also says societal prejudice are extrinsically, that is, a societal prejudice, that would be our beliefs, are extrinsically harmful because of society's morally wrong attitudes. And wrongful life lawsuits. Now, have anybody ever heard of wrongful life lawsuits? Yes, we got a number of hands, all right? Because in 1982, there was the first wrongful life suit. Now, it didn't win. A court in California suggested that a disabled child could sue her parents for not aborting her. What are you going to think when the child turns around and says, gee, I didn't get into Yale, and that was because you did not pre-genetically enhance me like all the guys who did make it? Or what I bring back is that you have a child who you genetically enhanced for football, and big bruising kid, and he injures everybody else who isn't pre-genetically enhanced. And everybody says, well, gee, I'm going to have one of them the next time. And if anybody did not see the movie Gattaca, G-A-T-A-C-A, you get it tonight and see it, because it is one of the finest films that has ever been made on this subject. Precedents, federal law require Medicare vaccination. Are there precedents in order to mandate things? Yes, there are. We have tons of them. And that is, not only do people have to be vaccinated, but even us in the hospital now as physicians, we can't even get in there unless we declare that we've been vaccinated or that we had a TB test or that. These are all mandated things. And this is just the beginning. Possible insurance coverage denial. Do you think that there's going to be, when they state, of course they're not going to know this for many, many years, that those kids who are genetically enhanced are going to be much better off than those who aren't? Really, in the book that I'm writing, it's clear that because of manipulation of genes, we're going to find, as we did in the sheep Dolly, that it had almost 400 different genetic defects, and that what they are saying is going to be a lifesaver really is going to be a lifesaver for their pocketbooks. And that is, it is going to make them billions of dollars. And in the meantime, this science will clearly show that when you fool around with genetic material, there is a very large price to pay. And unfortunately, it is the price of the embryo that is being manipulated because man believes that he could do a better job. All right? And the danger to a Christian church, I'm sorry, as I said, this was all changed, but my computer would not, we did it on an Apple and I couldn't get all the changes in, is that all these referred to here as morally prejudiced, along with any who morally object, will be liable and criminally prosecuted. And that is the churches that will come out and speak up against this will be prosecuted. And that's exactly what is happening in England right now to a number of bishops who stood up against certain topics, moral topics. They were actually sued successfully and then told to go get counseling for, I can't remember what it was, well, you can imagine what it was counseling for. Who is the societal prejudice? Okay? It is going to be the Christians. And it is the opinion papers like this one from Jordan that will herald judicial judgments mandated to undermine our faith, our children's moral rights. It will come swiftly, manufactured by biotech businessmen, manipulated by New Age bioethicists, and delivered by a knee-jerk media who will convince the uneducated public, and therefore governmental mandates will follow. There is a concerted effort to discredit Christians, erase their moral teaching, eliminate conscientious objection, prosecute and sue Christians, and eliminate its institutions. All right, this is hopefully everybody can see that. Can they take away our freedom to think? Can they limit our freedom to choose? Well, we already know in medicine that they're doing this in many of our residencies. All right, can they limit our freedom to choose not to do abortion, eugenics, transhumanism, cloning? Can they make us legally liable? Can they imprison us for our beliefs? Already Proposition 71 says yes to all of these. The only reason why we haven't been imprisoned, why we haven't had problems, is because it is a failed science. Public support for the Brave New World. Listen to this. 43% of people, and this is 6 years ago, approve of changing and making up the makeup of a human cell to improve babies' physical characteristics. 42% approve of upgrading children intellectually. More than 33% approve of genetically controlling their child's sexual preference. Questions to ask. Can they close our hospitals? Can they close our schools? Can they close our churches? The answer is yes. Is this depressing? Explosive life issues. Why? And this is what they're trying to do. The only thing that's protecting us right now is this Dickey Amendment, which prevents embryonic stem cell research. But they already came with H.R. 4808, which didn't pass. But it'll just be a time before they finally do away the Dickey Amendment. The manifest destiny of man being immortal, cloning, man becomes creator, and pregenetic selection, eugenics, God in man's image, and euthanasia, man determines what life is and is worth living. All right, and this is really coming into a perfect storm, where the greed, making of trillions of dollars on the baby business, the necessity of useless mouths, the everything that we had done, when you really regard what's happening to us economically, all right, this is going to be pushed by political opportunists, forced by the middle evil, and substantiated by New Age bioethicists. And how will they do this? The New Age bioethicists are sophists. They're relativists. They're utilitarian. It's always the greatest good. The end always justifies the means. And they make the unthinkable the debatable, and then the uniquely acceptable, and then a basic right. That's what happened with abortion. That's what happened with embryonic stem cell research and cloning. Do you realize that the University of Irvine has more bioethicists than the National Catholic Bioethics Center? Has double the amount. That's one university. And what happened? They tripled their bioethics department before Proposition 71 came out to convince people. All right, 7 years later on Proposition 1, we know when funding was needed, the phrase embryonic stem cells was used, right? When the actual progress was discussed, the word embryonic was dropped, all right, because it has never gotten out of the labs, that is embryonic. All right, important means here, the mantra. Why are we silent? The mantra is verbalized in C.S. Lewis's the Screw Tape Letters. How can we expect man to accept such evil? The junior devil said to the senior devil. Easily, says the senior devil. We will call evil good and good evil. Mm-hmm. All right. He did it. What does our Constitution say? All right, and you're going to be, oh boy, do we get to do a little bit quicker than that? Anyway, you'll be amazed that the constitutional amendment, the Constitution really doesn't do anything for us, really. There is really nothing that couldn't be easily manipulated in order to take away any type of conscientious objection that we have. In the California Constitution, a person may not be disqualified from entering or pursuing a business, profession, vocation, employment because of creed. All right? That's about as close as we have in order for any type of conscientious objection laws. What does let's see, oh boy, if we go into the next one, we hit the next one.
I'll send you, I'll move it when you want.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Well, let me quick go into what is transhumanism. Transhumanism is actually taking an animal or an insect and combining the genes of both. And there's actually a transhumanism society which clearly states that it is in the best interest for the human race to be able to take the best out of other types of genes and add it to our own. And it's already been done, especially as you know, we've been doing this as far as with plants are concerned, genetically enhanced plants. So we're going to be genetically enhanced plant people. I'm not going to go over too much over this. The Benitez case, of course, was very important for for conscientious objection. What happened, of course, was that the doctor who refused to do in vitro fertilization for a gay couple was found guilty, right? And that there could be no conscientious objection on that basis. All right, we'll go to the next one. Is there any indication currently that PGSD may be misused? Yes. Johns Hopkins University showed that 42% of institutions doing it offered it for sex selection. Proposition 71 Stem Cell Research and Cures Act showed how quickly public opinion changed. 93% of the Catholics were against cloning, now 70% accepted. In 2010, the AM fully supported human cloning. All right, Proposition 87, remember? It seems inconceivable in California a 12-year-old child can have an abortion without parental consent, yet not an aspirin at school. Pre-genetic selection. Well, which one would you like? The selection of an optimal embryo over its siblings. Those not selected are discarded, I should say. And let me ask you, would these people have been selected or eliminated? Without a doubt, she would have been eliminated, Mother Teresa. He had endogenous depression in the family, very, very depressed individual. And Einstein, in case people don't know, had a very abnormal parietal lobe. Maybe the cause of his genius, who knows? All of these would have been eliminated. Transhumanism. All right, we already went over this. Why don't we go to the next one? All right, I always like to read this one. The intellectual and cultural movement, this is what the society is about, that affirms the possibility and desirability of fundamentally improving human condition through applied reason, especially by developing and making widely available technologies to eliminate aging to greatly enhance human intellect, physical, and psychological capacity. Amazing. What do the New Age bioethicists think? Kaplan, a highly sought-after New Age bioethicist, says it is, in an interview in 2000, I don't think testing for freckles or blonde hair or musical aptitude is a bad thing. I think parents will want to do it. All right? Ravinsky, if you have cash in the United States, you can get it. The United States has no guidelines regarding this technology, yet in Germany it is forbidden. They have witnessed the fanaticism of man playing God. The Christian, it is not alone in the objection. An essay in Time magazine by Nancy Gibbs reflects the concerns of man playing God. All right? This is not yet a pro-life versus pro-choice situation. We have time. Next. Eugenics and pregenetic selection enhancement is splicing of genes to enhance the embryo. Is child insurance protection. I mean, is this going to be an issue? It definitely will. And that is child insurance. People may, who are not eugenically enhanced will not be able to get insurance. The social implication, that is there being two classes, haves and have-nots. As you know right now, the only difference between those, between any creed, I shouldn't say, between people who are black, white, yellow, etc., the only difference is the fact of maybe economics. Otherwise, everyone really is intellectually equal. However, there will be a have and have-nots. There will be those who are pre-genetic selection and those the have-nots, and that's a good reason to see that film called Gattaca. All right, next. All right, other post, Roe versus Wade, Oregon and Washington euthanasia law, Proposition 71, adoption rights. These are all passed. The chains are made. Will they be used on you? How soon we forget. Next. All right, 2001, Catholics 62%, $39 million spent on their side. Not even 700,000 we were able to get on our side. The constitutional right to use products of in vitro fertilization called co-modification of life for the convenience of those in power. Human embryos are sacrificed. Human embryos are created through cloning. Next. Next. And the whole thing about is law is morality. All right. And Oregon was very interested because I came across this, you know, because they pass a law, does it all of a sudden become moral? Well, it very much so. People, this is exactly what happened in Oregon. Interesting how once a law is passed, it changes one's morality and opinion. Initially in Oregon, the Medical Association was against euthanasia. After the law passed, Janet Reno, Attorney General, who would try to stop an enactment of the law, they turned around and they said that the majority of the people in the AMA now were for euthanasia and fought the Attorney General, even though just weeks before or months before, they had been against it. All right, let's keep on going. Next. Well, I'd like to really just read something to you. It's a letter that I wrote to the, that was presented to the Catholic bishops of California. And it stated, if we do not heed past history, we will repeat it. In Proposition 71, once again, they raised almost $39 billion. We, not even $1 million dollars, I should say. Their ability to convey a dangerous, unproven science that was in fact dangerous and unproven succeeded and did not succeed. But they did succeed primarily because of their economic might. And they were very well prepared, and we were not. In pre-implantation genetic selection differs from embryonic stem cell and cloning research in that it is feasible and is presently safe and will be immensely profitably economically. Their argument, however, are severely flawed. We must focus on fighting pre-genetic selection for what it is, simply eugenics for profit, with disregard for its dangers. In California, Hollywood has over 2,000 films of cautionary tales of man playing God. In California, we need to address this issue because the main biotech industry is here. And we probably will be the first state that'll be tested. And then the important thing here is now, what can we do? I wrote an article last night that hopefully will answer some of these questions. And that is there a difference between eugenics and what I call surgical genetics? And they're just as we have the ability to do surgery on an adult, on an infant. Also, even doing surgery on children that are in utero. There's nothing morally wrong with that. Now, if there is a gene in an embryo that is abnormal, is it immoral to remove that gene? Important question for us to ask. However, is it licit? That is it permissible to actually kill a number of embryos in order to select one that you want? Without a doubt. The end does not justify the means. Right. And that is the difference. And not only that, but eugenics is trying to enhance humanity, right? Not eliminate an illness. We're allowed to eliminate in medicine illnesses, but we are not here in order to manipulate our genes in order to be something that God had not intended us to be. And that is maybe partly an insect, because we can resist radiation or whatever it might be. However, it will be sold to us in sheep's clothing, very much like Proposition 71 was sold to us. Everybody remembers seeing all those advertisements of these people saying, you know, and they would bring one person after them, and they said, now, genetic, they would said very clearly, this was stem cell research will help this. What they didn't tell you was that all $3 billion was to go towards embryonic and cloning research. And so I think it is time that we understand that we have to initiate the debate for what it is, eugenics for a super race, organize our ethics think tank, organize and formulate a public relation bureau, have an ecumenical medical conference inviting all faiths, formulate our arguments of the burdens versus the benefits, teach the clergy and the faithful now, and seek legislation to prevent abuse of this technology and guarantee laws concerning conscientious objection. If we do that, we can succeed. If we remain silent, if we do nothing, evil will prevail.